Guilt and Desire, my cheating story with the man next door. If this story moved you, don't forget to drop a comment, and subscribe to Livia for more unforgettable stories that speak to the heart. The rain was whispering secrets, and I heard a sound from next door that made my heart skip, a rush of water that didn't belong in the stillness of my morning. I stood frozen, a dish towel limp in my hands, staring at the house across the fence. My husband, Daniel, was halfway across the country, his work trip dragging into its third week, leaving me alone in a home that felt like a museum of our fading marriage. At 41, I was a woman lost in the echoes of routine, meals prepped, floors swept, life measured in tasks checked off a list. The silence was a weight, pressing against my chest, stealing my breath. That's when Henry, the 61-year-old widower next door, became more than a quiet figure tending his roses. This is my story, a confession of a moment that lit a spark in the shadows of my heart, a fleeting connection that left me forever changed. It started with that sound, soft at first, like a pulse beneath the surface of my day. I was wiping down the kitchen counter, my phone open to a Reddit thread about finding meaning after 40, each post a quiet stab at the emptiness I couldn't name. Daniel's calls were brief, his voice distracted, his world of meetings and deadlines a galaxy apart from mine. The monotony was a slow suffocation, each day blending into the next, until that rush of water from Henry's house cut through the haze. Henry was a retired librarian, a man whose gentle strength and quiet grace seemed to hold the world at bay. His wife, Laura, had passed 6 years ago, and since then, he'd lived alone, his garden a living memory of her love. We weren't close, just neighbors who shared waves and small talk about the weather, his roses, or the way the sky turned violet at dusk. He was meticulous, the kind who locked his doors twice, so when I glanced out and saw his front door slightly ajar, my stomach twisted. The sound grew louder, insistent, like a plea I couldn't ignore. What if he was hurt? What if he'd fallen alone, with no one to hear him? I grabbed my sweater, my hands shaking, and crossed the lawn, the grass damp under my sneakers, the rain a soft curtain against my face. "Henry," I called, my voice trembling, barely audible over the drizzle. The house was still, the door creaking as I nudged it open, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The living room was pristine, the air tinged with cedar and the faint musk of old books, a single lamp casting a warm glow over furniture arranged with care. A bookshelf stood against one wall, its volumes worn but cherished, each one a piece of Henry's quiet world. The sound of water echoed from the hallway, urgent, pulling me forward like a thread unraveling. I hesitated, my fingers grazing the wall, torn between respecting his space and the fear that he needed me. The thought of him, alone, vulnerable, his strength undone by a moment's cruelty, pushed me on. "Henry, are you okay?" I called again, my voice sharper, breaking the silence like a stone through glass. No answer, just the water's relentless hum, a call I couldn't turn away from. The bathroom door was ajar, steam curling out like a whispered invitation, its warmth brushing my skin. I stopped, my breath shallow, every nerve alight with doubt. Then I saw him. Through the fogged glass of the shower, Henry stood under the stream, water tracing the lines of his shoulders, his gray hair slick against his neck. He was unaware of me, lost in the moment's rhythm, his silhouette steady, unbroken. I froze, my heart lurching as the reality of my intrusion hit me. I'd crossed a line, stepped into a private sanctuary uninvited. Shame burned through me, hot and heavy, and I turned to flee, my sneakers squeaking on the tile, my mind a chaos of apologies. But a shift in the steam caught my eye. He turned, his gaze meeting mine in the mirror's reflection, and time held its breath. I braced for anger, for a sharp rebuke to send me running. But his eyes were soft, a deep hazel that held no judgment, only a quiet understanding, as if he saw the loneliness I carried, as if he'd been waiting for me to stumble into his world. "Sophie, I'm so sorry," I stammered, my hands fumbling, words tripping over themselves. I heard the water. I thought something was wrong. He smiled, a gentle curve that disarmed me, his chuckle low and warm, like a fire on a cold night. "It's all right, Sophie," he said, stepping out and wrapping a towel around himself with an ease that made my pulse race, his movements calm, unhurried. I left the door open. "You were just looking out for me." Looking out for him. The words felt like a lie, a fragile shield against the truth stirring in my chest. I mumbled another apology, my face flaming, and backed toward the door, desperate to escape the weight of his gaze, the way it seemed to see me, not the wife, not the homemaker, but the woman I'd forgotten I could be. His voice stopped me, soft and steady, like a hand catching mine. "Thank you," he said, his eyes holding mine, a flicker of gratitude that pierced my heart. "It's good to know someone cares." Those words wrapped around me, sinking into the cracks of my solitude, a spark that glowed as I hurried home, the rain cold against my skin, my mind a tangle of guilt and something I couldn't name. The days that followed were a dance of routine, each step a tether to the life I'd built with Daniel. I cleaned the house until it gleamed, baked bread that filled the air with warmth, answered Daniel's texts with smiles I didn't feel. But Henry's presence lingered, a quiet melody woven into the fabric of my days, his voice echoing in the spaces between my tasks. Our encounters were small at first, a wave as he tended his roses, their petals soft and vibrant, a shared laugh when I dropped a watering can, his hand brushing mine as he helped me up, his touch a warmth that lingered too long. Each moment was a spark, faint but persistent, lighting up the shadows I'd grown used to. I told myself it was nothing, just a kindness born of loneliness, but the lie grew fragile with every glance, every smile that felt like a secret we hadn't meant to share. One afternoon, I leaned over the fence, the air sweet with the scent of blooming jasmine, Henry's garden a wild tangle of roses and memory. "Your garden's fighting to be seen," I said, my tone light but my heart racing, a nervous flutter in my chest. "Could you use some help?" He looked up, his eyes crinkling with a smile that felt like dawn breaking. "I'd like that," he said, his voice low, carrying a warmth that settled in my bones. "Laura used to make this place alive. I've let it slip." We started working together, our hands brushing in the soft earth as we pruned branches and planted bulbs, the soil a quiet witness to our growing ease. Henry was different from Daniel, whose world was a blur of contracts and conference calls, his presence distant even when he was home. Henry listened, his stories of Laura painting a life of love and loss, how they'd planned to see Paris, how she dreamed of a little cafe where they'd serve coffee and poetry, how her laughter still echoed in the roses he tended. I found myself sharing too, confessing things I'd locked away, how I used to paint, filling canvases with colors that felt like freedom, how I'd stopped when life with Daniel became a checklist of duties. "You should paint again," he said one day, his gaze steady, cutting through the walls I'd built. "There's a light in you, Sophie. Don't let it fade." His words were a breeze, stirring something I thought had died, a warmth that bloomed in my chest and scared me with its intensity. Each hour in his garden was a step toward a version of myself I'd buried, a woman who laughed freely, who felt the world in bursts of color, who could stand in the sun and not fear its burn. But with every moment, his hand steadying mine as I reached for a thorn stem, his laughter a melody that warmed the air, his eyes catching mine in a way that made time pause, a spark grew, quiet but dangerous. It was in the way he said my name, soft and deliberate, like a note he wanted to savor. It was in the silence that followed, heavy with truths we hadn't dared to voice. I told myself it was innocent, that Daniel's absence had left me adrift, that I was just lonely. But deep down I knew it was more, a longing that unfurled like a flower, beautiful and perilous, its roots sinking deeper with every shared breath. The spark became a flame, fed by moments that felt like gifts we hadn't meant to give. One evening, we sat on his porch, glasses of lemonade sweating in the dusk, the air thick with the hum of crickets and the scent of roses. He handed me a sketchbook, its pages yellowed, filled with Laura's drawings, simple lines that captured the world's quiet beauty. She loved to draw, he said, his voice soft, his eyes distant yet warm. It reminds me of you, the way you see things. I took the book, our fingers brushing, and the air shifted, charged with a truth we'd been circling. My heart raced, my cheeks warm, and I looked away, clutching the sketchbook like a shield. But the feeling stayed, a thread pulling me closer to a line I both feared and craved. The night that changed everything came without warning, the rain a heavy drum against my windows, each drop a heartbeat echoing my own. Daniel called, his voice tinny, promising he'd be home soon, but the words were hollow, unable to reach the ache that had taken root in me. When the call ended, the silence was suffocating, a void that swallowed me whole. I baked cookies to fill it, the kitchen warm with the scent of vanilla, each stir of the dough a plea for something to feel alive. Before I knew it, I was at Henry's door, the plate shaking in my hands, my heart a wild thing I couldn't tame. He opened the door, his smile soft, his eyes bright with a surprise that felt like recognition, as if the rain had conspired to bring me here. "Cookies?" he asked, stepping aside, his voice a warm embrace. "You're too kind, Sophie." We sat by his fireplace, the flames casting a golden glow, their dance a mirror to the fire stirring within me. The rain was a chorus outside, weaving through our laughter as we talked about forgotten dreams, favorite books, the way the world felt softer in the rain. But the air grew heavy, thick with a truth we'd avoided, a truth that pressed against my chest, begging to be named. When I reached for my glass, my hand brushed his, and neither of us moved. The moment stretched, a fragile bridge between what was and what could be, the world holding its breath. "You don't have to stay," he whispered, his voice low, his eyes searching mine, offering me a way back, a chance to step away from the edge. "If this feels wrong." But it didn't feel wrong, it felt like waking up, like breathing for the first time in years. I leaned in, and his lips met mine, soft at first, like a question, then deeper, a shared confession of all the moments we'd held back. His hands were gentle, cradling my face, his touch a map to a place I'd forgotten, a place where I was Sophie, seen and whole, not a role, not a shadow, but a woman whose heart sang in harmony with his. The kiss was a quiet fire, a spark that warmed without burning, a moment of connection that felt like coming home. The rain roared outside, but inside, time stopped, the world narrowing to the warmth of his presence, the way his breath mingled with mine, the way his touch seemed to know me better than I knew myself. When we pulled apart, his eyes held a mix of wonder and sorrow, his fingers lingering on my hand as if afraid to let go. "I didn't mean for this," he said, his voice heavy, each word a weight we both carried. "I don't want to hurt you or him." The mention of Daniel was a cold wave, guilt flooding me, dousing the spark but not erasing it. I nodded, my throat tight, and left, the rain soaking through my clothes as I crossed the lawn, each step a struggle between longing and shame, my heart a battlefield where desire and duty clashed. The days that followed were a storm of silence, each moment a reminder of the line I'd crossed. Daniel returned, his smile warm but distant, oblivious to the fracture in me. I threw myself into our life, cooking his favorite meals, planning evenings by the fire, but every touch was a lie, every laugh a mask that slipped when he wasn't looking. Henry kept his distance, our interactions reduced to fleeting glances across the fence, his absence a quiet ache that followed me through the house. I tried to pretend it never happened, to bury the memory in routine, but it lingered, a soft glow in the corners of my mind, a moment I couldn't unfeel. One evening, as I tended my garden, the sky ablaze with sunset, I found a small package at the fence, a journal, its cover worn, with a note in Henry's neat handwriting. "Sophie, you reminded me that hearts can still beat." Keep yours alive. My breath caught, tears blurring the words. It wasn't a declaration of love, but a recognition, a gift that saw the moment not as a betrayal, but as a spark of life, a reminder to feel deeply, to exist fully. That was the twist I hadn't expected. What I thought was a mistake was, to him, a moment of light, a shared humanity that didn't need to destroy, but could inspire. Henry faded from my life, his garden blooming alone, his presence a shadow I learned to navigate. I focused on Daniel, on rebuilding what I'd nearly lost, but the memory of Henry lingered, not as a lover, but as a mirror, reflecting the woman I could be, the one who painted, who felt, who lived without apology. Sometimes I'd see him in his yard, his hands in the soil, and our eyes would meet, a silent acknowledgement of what we'd shared, a spark that warmed us both. Daniel doesn't know, and Henry and I are neighbors again, bound by a secret that lives in the quiet spaces. I don't regret it, not fully. That moment was a gift, a reminder that we're allowed to want, to connect, to burn bright even in the shadows. As the rain falls tonight, I wonder, what sparks are you carrying, waiting for the courage to let them shine? If this story moved you, don't forget to drop a comment, and subscribe to Livia for more unforgettable stories that speak to the heart.